And I think we're good to get started. Hello everyone. Today's ThursdAI, May 23rd. Welcome to the show, to our weekly show about AI that's live streamed on X. My name is Alex Volkov. I'm an AI evangelist with Weights and Biases, and I'm coming to you live from Seattle for the first time in my life. Actually, I've never been here before. And Seattle is a big Microsoft hub and Amazon hub, and the reason why I'm here this week is I got invited to the Microsoft Build conference and actually did a little presentation there. Very little. I don't know if it's worth mentioning or not, but we're from Weights and Biases. We're sponsoring the Microsoft Build conference. We're helping them as well, and it's been quite awesome to see the announcement from that. So we're going to talk about those this week, but also there's a bunch of other stuff in AI that we should cover this week as well. Coming to you live from a hotel room with a roll mic that I have with me in travel conditions, but hopefully everything sounds and comes through well. So I want to just say thanks to everyone who joins us on stage and in the audience. I see a bunch of folks that I would like to say thank you for joining from week to week to listen to the greatest AI age advancing from week to week in incredible pace. And this week was not a slouch in a bunch of updates, including open source ones. There's a bunch of open source ones. Hey, Tony, I see you out there. Hey, Ryan and Steven, everybody in the audience is welcome. Thank you for joining us as well. If you are new and you joined us for the first time, welcome. This is a weekly show we do on X, and then it's recorded. And I then also create a newsletter about this as well called ThursdAI. And we've been doing this for more than a year, and it's been incredible to see just the crazy pace of innovation. I think with that, I'll just say hi to the folks here on stage. I have Atapai, welcome.
Hey, dude.
How's your week been? Full of AI stuff?
Yeah, I think the really unfortunate thing about the Scarlett Johansson thing was that the Microsoft Build, some of the announcements were overshadowed, I think. There's actually a lot that went on in Microsoft, right? There's actually a lot of new stuff there. And that's been pretty unfortunate. The drama has just overshadowed everything.
That's true, and we're gonna cover some of the ScarJo stuff with OpenAI, definitely, because I know that's what folks want to hear. That one broke through the bubble surface area for sure. I have friends who have nothing to do with AI, and they're talking about this, and we're gonna definitely talk about this, and also the Microsoft Build stuff. I actually recorded with Ryan Carson, one of the folks who we have here, join our show from TikTok. I think he's flying today. I recorded like a 45-minute Microsoft Build focus. So for folks who are listening to this on the podcast, you'll hear this on the second part of this. But here live, we're going to talk about some of the highlights of the Microsoft Build stuff. Absolutely. And also cover OpenAI as well. And Wolfram, welcome to the stage, man. How's your week been? A bunch of releases I saw.
Oh yeah, so many new models, so much stuff to test. And it's great. I'm testing already and it's excellent.
Amazing. So we're going to chat about some of these things as well. And absolutely welcome to the show. It's great to see you here from week to week. And Nistan just joined. Hey, Nistan.
Hello.
All right, folks. So we have a bunch of stuff to talk about. And as usual, I'll try to run and do a TLDR. And then with the help of my co-hosts here, they will hold me accountable to the stuff that I may have missed. Again, because I've spent most of my week here in Microsoft Build in Seattle. And I think we'll do a TLDR, and then we're going to get actually started and just chatting about some of the open source stuff and then the Microsoft and OpenAI stuff. Here is everything that we've talked about on ThursdAI, May 23rd, live streamed, at least I'm live streaming from Seattle during the Microsoft Build conference. And we obviously mentioned the Microsoft Build conference, but we started with open source and we covered multiple very interesting things. I'm going to run through them like super quick. First of all, we covered that Hugging Face committed $10 million in zero GPU. Zero GPU is the ability of you uploading your AI app and then Hugging Face running them on like very high-end GPUs, and it doesn't cost you anything. It puts you in the queue. So like this commitment of $10 million is like very great for open source source and demos of every other model and research. They also added an integration with local models like LM Studio and Llama CPP, and they added some two new ones, Jan and Backyard AI. It's literally just a button on the model pages with a drop down that says use this model locally, and it like immediately opens this model in your local devices. Super cool for discoverability, and shout out to Hugging Face and LM Studio for this, because we really LM Studio. We then mentioned that Mistral released a new version of 7B 0.3, both base and instruct versions. It has a new and expanded vocabulary of 32,000 some tokens. Wolfram Ravenwolf, our resident researcher, looked into this and saw that a bunch of this is function calling specific things. So this model now supports function calling natively, and a bunch of other tokens reserved probably for different things that are cooking up, maybe like agents. We also mentioned that new versions of Mistral, like 8 times 7B, and Mistral 22 times 7B are also probably coming with 0.3, so that the whole range of Mistral models will now get function calling support by default. And then this means great things for the whole open source community, because many people still open source and fine-tune 7B and Mistral models, and now all of them will get function calling support, which is very important and super, super cool. So shout out to Mistral for that. And again, shout out for their hackathon coming up this weekend, which we also sponsor in Paris. So if you're in there, please go. We also then covered a lot, and thanks for Yam and Nista and a bunch of other folks. We covered the Phi releases. Phi-3 from Microsoft released a couple of weeks ago. The mini model was 3.8 billion parameters, and now just in time for Microsoft Build, we got two new model sizes. So Phi-3 small is a 7 billion parameter, and a Phi-3 medium is a 14 billion parameter model. Both of them come with 4K and 128K. And interesting, I just noticed that the small version comes with 8K context by default, which is fun. But also they released a vision model on top of the Phi-3 Mini, which is very well performant compared to something like Claude Haiku, for example, or even they compared themselves to GPT-4. It's not quite there yet, but it's really comparatively well done, and it runs locally on your device because it's a tiny model. It's a 4.2 billion parameter vision model that has a projector and an image encoder, etc. Phi is super cool, context X of 128K, and the metrics are very good. We also mentioned the metrics in accordance of mentioning that LMC's Arena released a new category called hard prompts, where they analyze some of the prompts more on a conversational back and forth basis. And some models are doing actually better with hard prompts, and some models do worse. For example, Llama 8B performs comparatively to GPT-4 in the English-only leaderboard, but it drops quite a bit under hard prompts. But Phi-3, for example, is trained for reasoning tasks specifically, and it's notably improved when used on harder prompts. So that's very interestingly in accordance with, and Yam did a great breakdown of how Phi was trained using the textbooks is all you need methods and paper. And so we're really excited to get these 5 models and give them a try, especially the medium model, the 14 billion parameter model. It looks very good. We then also mentioned that Cohere released a few updates to the Aya 101, Aya 23, I think it's called. They released a few models, and those models span 101 languages and with 200,000 human annotations. And it looks like we also had a model from Aya that was already out released, and so now they compiled. So it's Cohere for AI, not necessarily Cohere itself, and they hired a bunch of language ambassadors. So multilinguality is something that we'd like to see, and this model looks like it's a state-of-the-art multilingual model across 100 plus languages. We've seen this move from Google as well, and OpenAI also changed their tokenizer with GPT-4o that support other languages. So it looks like multilinguality is very important, comes in very hot, and this is now the new state of the art for that. So if you're into low resource languages, what they called, feel free to check out Aya and from Cohere for AI, and shout out to them. That's pretty much everything we've covered in the open source, as well as a few fine-tunes and releases from our friends Eric Hartford, which we'll add in the show notes. Then we had a long conversation about OpenAI's pausing Sky Voice due to complaints or some misunderstandings and legal counsel being hired from Scarlett Johansson. We covered this quite a lot, so if you're interested in this conversation, you probably read about this in every AI newsletter or other, but we definitely also covered the damages part of this and whether or not this is the same voice and how the actual actress feels. So feel free to listen to this conversation. My take on this was that models will likely be able to imitate anyone anyway very soon, if not like in 24 months. So it's very interesting that this discussion augmented the other discussions as well. And we did mention that this discussion overshadowed everything that came out from Microsoft Build Conference. This is their annual developer conference that happens right now in Seattle, which this is the reason I'm in Seattle. And some of the stuff that they've announced in this Microsoft Build is definitely the highlight was new PC lineup from Microsoft called CoPilot Plus PCs. Those are AI native PCs, laptops mostly. I think there's like only one non-laptop offering. They're running a Qualcomm Snapdragon software hardware in there, and they have a new thing called NPU, neural processing unit. So in addition, like we have a CPU and a GPU in those models, and now we have something called a neural processing unit specifically for AI inference tasks to run on device in a very efficient way. They announced some of these laptops together with the ability of running several features specific to those laptops. And we talked about two of them, and one of them specifically also caused a little bit of controversy. So one of those features was Co-Create, where in Microsoft Paint you can paint and then give a prompt, and then a diffusion model will generate a diffusion like image based on your paint. So you can paint mountains, like it looks like nice mountains. And the other feature that they showcased, which gives some people pause, and we've talked about this, and even here on stage, some people don't really like that it's coming from Microsoft, is called Recall. Recall is basically an AI assistant ability to help you with everything that you saw. They take screenshots every few seconds and they embed those screenshots and the text in them in a vector database. So with natural language, you can just look up something that you saw that you don't remember. I find it like incredibly powerful. If I search a bunch of tweets and I read a bunch of tweets, if all of my Twitter was like embedded, I can like search super quickly. That was great. But rightfully, many people raise concerns that Microsoft will potentially not be able to protect everybody's work. Even though it runs on edge and locally, it may not be fully local. It may still send some telemetry. You may not be able to opt out very easily. This definitely raises a few eyebrows, specifically as it comes to Microsoft and privacy. But the highlight of this feature is that it runs on device. At least to me, it runs on device, and we're very happy with kind of the movement towards edge compute and device. We've been talking about this for ages, lower models, smaller models. The Phi-3 example from before is also part of this like move from Microsoft to run stuff on edge, and it's very cool. Microsoft also added like an AI button to Windows, and there's now CoPilot built into everything. This is, to me, the highlight of the conference. CoPilot is a platform, a full end-to-end platform, including the cloud stuff, so you can build the CoPilot Studio, including the local CoPilot on Windows, including new updates to GitHub's CoPilot. So they talked about Workspace, which we've had Idan Gazit from GitHub Next to talk about Workspace, which is great. But also they talked about CoPilot extensions, where now GitHub CoPilot can have extensions that you can use that know specific things about specific APIs, which is super cool, because no longer you have to trust the knowledge of the model. You can build extensions for it for your own stuff. Microsoft had a slew of other announcements. We can't go over all of them. We did go over all of them, me and Ryan Carson together. So I'll add this as a special, probably Sunday episode. We just, from Microsoft Build, we had the whole discussion about everything that they've released. Definitely tune in for that on Sunday. And the very interesting thing that we also talked about, and I want to thank Tanishq Abram for chiming in here as well, about Anthropic releasing a scaling monosemanticity paper. They mapped features of an LLM, so not like activations in the neural engine of the LLM, but actually mapped them into like textable features. For example, the feature we talked about is deception, or another is code errors, or another is, the funny example is Golden Gate Bridge. So they found a feature called Golden Gate Bridge, and then they were able to either up its importance or lower its importance in the output of the text. And so if you up this importance, the model actually thinks it's the Golden Gate Bridge. It's a really funny example. But if you think about this, work is incredible from a alignment and steerability perspective, because deception is one of those features. You can actually figure out when the model is trying to think about deception or self-importance or like a bunch of other things. So very interesting conversation, very important research as well to understand how these model thinks, what they think about, and maybe able to steer them better and align them better to what we want as humans. Very interesting discussion. And the highlight there is Anthropic did this on Claude Sonnet, which is in production big model, where previous these examples were running on small models, and this means a lot of good things for interoperability and alignment, which we all need as well. In the vision and video category, we covered a new company, new to me at least, called OpenBNB, releasing a vision model trained on Llama 3 called Mini CPM. Mini CPM is a vision encoder that does very high performance like vision tasks, including understanding and captions, etc. And the very interesting thing is when they released, they already compared it to Phi-3 visions version that we just mentioned before, and they say that they achieve smooth inference with 8 gigabytes of CPU memory, or GPU memory, I guess, with better performance than Phi-3 across multiple benchmarks. In the same week, we got 2 state-of-the-art like vision running locally vision models, and that's super cool as well. And shout out to the OpenBNB team. We'll add this to the show notes if you want to test this out. In the voice and audio, we obviously talked about the Sky Voice a lot. And then the last category that we've covered is tools and hardware, where we mentioned that there's some security concerns about the Rabbit R1 device and how logging into it is problematic, and also some of the past of this company. But also the Humane AI pin is looking to sell their company potentially because the rollout of their product was not that great. And so the hardware AI devices is still going through a rough patch. But the highlight there is that both of the issues that those devices had were mitigated by some of the ability of replacing the underlying model like GPT-4o. So GPT-4o came out and it was like twice as fast as GPT-4 Turbo, and both of these devices implemented this immediately and became even faster. Wolfram, did I miss anything important from this week in the big companies and new models that we should mention here in the TLDR section?
I don't think so. That is pretty comprehensive.
All right, awesome. So we'll get started with our favorite thing, which is open source. Open source AI, let's get it started. And as I said, we'll try to keep this started again. Apologies. I'm using my roll mic and I still don't know how to pause this off. All right. So, open source AI, let's get it started. So, we've talked about some Hugging Face updates. I really want to shout out the folks at Hugging Face. I invited them here to talk about some of the stuff as well. Not only did they announce a strengthening partnership with Microsoft during build. So actually, like Satya shouted out, "Hey, Microsoft loves open source and loves Hugging Face." They introduced a new functionality in Hugging Face that just adds the ability to run local models with one click. It's super cool. Let me see if I can find a tweet from that to you. I definitely have an LM Studio tweet. I think there's been a lot of talk recently about the discoverability of LM Studio, and specifically, I think it was Yassine started this, and then Andrei Kopati chimed in that, hey, my mom can't run like LM Studio or something like this. And then Yegil, the one guy who works in LM Studio, was like, yeah, sure, it should be like a little easier, etc. But I think this really helps the discoverability and the usability of LM Studio. I don't know what they're complaining, honestly, personally. LM Studio is super awesome. But also Hugging Face is now committing $10 million in GPU resources for everybody, for the GPU poor. You probably saw some stuff from, if you follow the same folks that we follow, you probably saw some, I think there was a Hugging Face space that you can measure if you're GPU poor or GPU rich. And most of us are like a GPU poor. Hugging Face is using some of their money basically to help people running their apps and examples on Hugging Face with something called Zero GPU, which is their queue that your app can join. And if they have a GPU available, they will assign this GPU power to your app. So some of these demos and a bunch of demos that we've added in the show notes throughout the time we do ThursdAI, a bunch of them obviously on Hugging Face. So that's really cool. So really wanted to shout out Hugging Face for this endeavor. Yeah, I guess if you guys want to comment on this, then Wolfram, please feel free, unless, or we're going to move on. Anything else from Hugging Face this week? that was interesting that I missed? I think that's mostly it.
So it's a drop-down menu whenever people post the GGUF files. So whenever people post the quantized files, now you just have a menu on the right that says use this model and launch it either in LM Studio or some other app, and it just opens, it just redirects you to LM Studio. And I tested it with the ones I posted myself, and it works. I think it's very good overall. It's just like these very small, tiny things make a big difference in usability overall.
And discoverability. I think like many more folks will discover LM Studio because it just has used this model. And local apps, like we've been saying, local apps are awesome. Just a shout out to those folks because most of these apps expose a local server as well. It's very interesting that I don't see Ollama in here. I would assume that Ollama would also be in this list. But for most of these apps, some of them expose the server as well. So if you're building something local, you don't have to change your code. So if you have a code that runs with OpenAI, most of these LM Studio exposes an OpenAI compatible server locally, so you can actually run Llama 3 7B or whatever your Mac can handle, and then just drop in replacement with your existing code and run them locally, which we love here on ThursdAI. And the more open source and the more local stuff running, the better. All right, I think let's talk about the biggest open source release from this week. Let's actually cover a smaller one super quick with Wolfram, and then we'll talk about the bigger one. As we know, the Mistral 7B is one of the top models that we've been talking about. Mistral has released recently like a 0.2 update, and now they released a 0.3 update probably before their hackathon this weekend. And everybody's, oh, new Mistral release. Like all of us are like very excited when Mistral does something, but it doesn't, there's no new torrent link. And it's barely a new thing, right? The only thing that I saw there was like function calling support, and which we already had with the fine tuning of Hermes Pro on top of Mistral, and also a new vocabulary with a little bit of extra tokens. Wolfram, you looked into this. Could you tell us a bit about what's going on there?
Yeah, so they raised the token number from 32,000 to 32,768. And those 768 tokens, those are 5 tool use tokens that they have for the function calling feature. And the rest is for future use or whatever they may be cooking internally. So we got a lot of additional tokens basically, or vocabulary. But that didn't change much, and I already tested the model, and it is not it's not much better, or not better at all than the version 0.2. So I think it's basically they added the function calling and tuned that in without raising the intelligence itself. But function calling is very important if you want to go agentic, which is more and more the use. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Function calling is very important. Any idea of if there's anything new with their function calling, by the way? I'm not sure if they announced. So I saw the model card. I didn't see any instructions for function calling. So we only got the tokens, right?
Yeah, there are instructions on their documentation page. So they have an actual documentation about function calling, and they explain the extra tokens and stuff like that.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, but it's not different from what, for example, Cohere is doing or the others.
Oh, amazing.
So you basically have the extra tokens, and you can use the rag and put it between the tags, and then the model knows that is input that comes from the rag component and not from the user, and use it accordingly.
Thanks to Mistral for listening to us and giving us function calling natively, because now basically all the fine tunes on top of this model will also get function calling, and not only the Hermes Pro ones. Shout out to Mistral as well. And I will mention again, the Mistral has a hackathon together with Cerebral Valley, and we're sponsoring this in Paris. So if you're somewhere in Europe, Paris is probably a train ride for you, or maybe a short flight. If you want to see the Eiffel Tower and hack with cool people, go to this Mistral hackathon. It's this weekend. I think it starts tomorrow. Maybe on Saturday. I'll definitely add this to the show notes, and it's a cool place to be. They're probably going to showcase some more cool stuff, as this release is probably related to the hackathon as well, including building with function calling as well. I think we can move on from Mistral to the bigger open source news. Yeah, Wolfram, go ahead.
By the way, that is just one of the new version 0.3. So we will get the 8x7B as well, and the 822B as well, version 0.3. I think it may be out already. I have seen something about there are already links stuff. So that's even more exciting.
Oh, amazing,
The bigger
amazing.
ones.
So please feel free to add them if you see them right now, and if they're breaking news. I always love using the breaking news button. So if you do see them, please pin them to the top of the space, and then we'll add them to the show notes as well. But it does make sense that they will update the whole array of models. That would be a way bigger deal than just this one version, right? If they update function calling throughout their all open source models, including the Mistral 7B, Mistral 8 times 7, and 8 times 22, or Bigstral as we used to call it, that would be a bigger deal that they're aligning all their models with function calling, because we know the Mistral does stuff well, and we absolutely know that if they decided to add function calling, those function calling instructions or fine tune would be very good for the whole ecosystem. Everybody who fine tunes their models on top will have to refine tune, and now they'll get function calling out of the box, and people can do a bunch of agentic stuff with that, which is very important. Awesome. So shout out to Mistral for that. And let's move on to Microsoft open sourcing Phi-3. 3 new versions. One version that we already got, like Phi-3 Mini. I think that's the version that we already have before. It's MIT licensed, so fully you can use it for anything. Yam, welcome to the stage, by the way. I wanted to see if we can if we can chat about Phi, and if you had the chance to try the bigger models that they released.
Oh yeah, there is a lot to talk about Phi. It's a very interesting model, must say.
Yeah, go ahead. What's your takes on these releases? We got, let me just summarize for folks, and then please take it away. We got the Phi Mini, which we had like for a while. This is the 3.8 billion parameter, I believe, model. And then we got Phi Small, which is 7 billion parameter model. And then we got Phi Medium, which is 14 billion parameters. All of them were hinted at the release, but we didn't actually get those models, and we've been waiting for them for a while, and now we actually got them. And in addition to all of this, we got a vision model that's, I think, on top of the Phi Mini with 128K context. And so all these models come in short context and long context versions as well. So what's interesting about this, Yam? What's interesting about the Phi models to you, and how are the metrics?
Sure. Yeah, look, the whole premise of the whole Phi series is that the quality of the data influence the results of the model, which is for sure, absolutely. However, just how much? The question is, how much can you push the results of the model by changing data quality, which, or in turn, it saves you compute, or in turn, it just, based on the compute that you already have, you get a better model. And the Phi papers show incredible numbers if you look at them. The models are competitive on benchmarks with Llama 3. We'll get to that, but they are competitive on benchmarks with Llama 3. And they are not trained on, I don't know, not even half of the same amount of tokens. So it's a big deal if this is actually what it is. What is interesting about specifically the 14B model is that if you take the 14B model versus Llama 3 8B model, because it was trained much longer, according to Chinchilla law, they should be equal loss-wise. So it's really interesting to see which one is better comparing them, because one is twice the size and one is a little bit more than twice as trained. So it's really interesting. From what I've seen, it's more sensitive. It's very hard to tell because it's subjective. It's vibe testing. You know how it goes.
Yep.
But it's more sensitive to the way you rephrase your prompts than Llama 3. Llama 3 seems to be more robust, but again, benchmarks are the same. Vibe testing is different between them, and it's very hard to measure vibes.
Yeah, it's really hard to measure vibes on Phi specifically, because when it came out, I really had a tough time, even for the smaller model. I had a tough time figuring out what folks will use this for. My logic-based stuff and math-based stuff, and I think they talked about Phi fine-tuned for math specifically, beating even larger models. They had that in build, but just playing around with the smaller model, it answered logic-based questions way better than even bigger models, significantly better, which was very surprising because this model is tiny and runs fully local on my machine. I think that's what they want to do. They're like focusing on, I think Satya called it out on stage, SLMs, small language models, and that's what their focus is. But then many folks did not really like it and didn't believe the There's the whole talk of whether or not they're contaminated on benchmarks, etc. And now also the other thing we should mention here as well that we're going to probably talk about once we get there, is that LMCs released a hard prompts category, and in those hard prompts category, Phi is like climbing up. So compared to the general prompts that people use Phi to test in LMCs, Phi is actually, it's trained for reasoning tasks, and it looks like notable improvement if you measure this on the hard prompts category in LMCs versus like other models, which looks like Llama 3 8B drops quite a bit for hard prompts and Phi rises. So that's in addition to the vibe fields. Wolfram, please go ahead. Tell us what are your thoughts on Phi models, especially the bigger ones.
Yeah, what I realized with Phi was that there are different kinds of intelligence in the model. There's the intelligence regarding logics, and it's really good at that. And what it lacked was the writing style. So if you talk to it, or that is maybe also something that we have with GPT-4o, where some say, oh, it's much better, and others say, no, it's not better than GPT-4, for example. You have the difference in the hard questions, the stuff where it matters if you can reason well, and where the writing, sometimes the model looks smarter because it writes so well, like a charismatic person that isn't as smart as somebody else, but because they can write so well, they look smarter than they are, especially if the smart person is not very good at talking. And regarding Phi specifically, I tested the vision model, which is just 4.2 billion parameters, and it did better than Mistral 7B in my tests. So it's a new 7B. So that was also another very surprising moment where I thought, oh, wow, it's a vision model and it has 128K context, and it's still just so small. It's Mistral 7B, the new instructor, in my tests at least. And that was also very surprising, actually.
Oh, that's super cool. And the Phi-3 vision is built on the Phi-3 Mini, right? There's a very tiny model with additional a vision head as well. That's very surprising. So let's talk some numbers, and then we'll let other folks chime in on the Phi stuff. Let's look at Phi-3 small comparison. On the MMLU, the aggregate benchmark in 5-shot MMLU, they're getting 75.5 with just 7 billion parameters. That beats Gemma 7B, which we know Gemma is not really 7B. It's like more like 8.9 or something. It beats Mistral 8 times 7B MOE with 5 points lead. Beats Llama 3 8 billion. Llama 3 gets 66 on MMLU, and Phi-3 small gets 75. So like almost a 10-point lead on MMLU. And then obviously they compare it to GPT-3, and then they shouldn't compare this to GPT-3. But still, it's quite incredible. We get these models, they're like super tiny, run on our Macs, and look way better than GPT 3.5. But I think at this point, GPT-4 has been out for a year. Comparing to GPT 3.5 is not really like a fair comparison. And then the medium one is even better in MMLU. So the medium one, the 4K, is 78 on MMLU. It's like very up there, pretty much beating all of the same models as well. And the vision model beats Lava 1.6, beats GwenVL, and beats Claude Haiku even. And we've talked about Claude Haiku being good. They claim they beat like Gemini 1.5 vision, but I don't know about this. And GPT-4 Turbo is still the best vision model that's in their benchmarks. It's very interesting. Even though I think the Gemini 1.5 Pro is pretty good as well. So those are the metrics. They beat like significantly bigger models with a very tiny model. It's very impressive. But we have a different model that we'll talk about in the vision section that beats those as well. Any other thoughts on Phi? What will you use this for? It looks like it's very good for logic-based things and math specifically. Anyone else want to chime in on Phi before we move on?
I'll chime in really quickly. The 13B one, the 14B, it's very good for work stuff. So if you need a list of things, or if you just need some technical ideas or trying to solve a problem, it's very good at problem solving. It's not great at summaries, so I would just use Llama 3 8B for that, or for, I don't know, writing emails, stuff like that. But I really like Phi Medium. I'm really liking it for mainly for technical stuff.
Yep. It looks like on CodeGen, it's also doing a decent 62.2 human eval thing. It doesn't come close to Llama 70B, obviously, but it's up there with GPT 3.5, and it's local. Yeah, it's quite good. So definitely shout out to folks at Microsoft releasing these like higher quality models, specifically because I think they trained on a bunch of synthetic data as well, and this does good First of all, having those models. One thing that I remember from the build stage is that they mentioned that they're going to give every teacher, so we're going to cover this in the build section as well, they're going to give every teacher in the United States Khan Academy's Khanmigo AI assistant for free. And they mentioned like briefly on the fly that they will do this by having local Phi models fine-tuned specifically on math, and they'll be like incredible on math as well. So yeah, I think it's very interesting because of the way Phi was trained with the tiny stories dataset, if you remember. Could you remind us about like that? Because I think it was trained with a curriculum as well, right? So I think it's very interesting that it ends up in the classroom teaching students. But please remind us.
Look, we don't know a lot. We know the first paper. From the first paper, I think the title was "Textbooks Are All You Need," if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And it is exactly that. You are creating synthetic textbooks out of raw data. And basically, if you think about it, is just data cleaning on extreme way. If you think about what it's actually doing, you are taking raw data and you are rephrasing and cleaning out the raw data to make it look like a textbook, like with explanations and questions and so on and so forth, just rephrasing the data a little bit. And this is what is going on behind the first Phi. According to the papers, the same line of thinking is on the other two papers as well, which you create synthetic data in some way, clean synthetic data to boost the model performance, but more than the first paper, we just don't know. There aren't many details in the papers about how exactly do they do this. But yeah, it's interesting, very interesting. Just to think about what would Llama 3 be if it was trained for the 15 trillion tokens, but with all the Phi tricks, it would be much, much better than what it is today. Just thinking about it. I think, I don't know, maybe it's just overfitting, but I think it has a lot of potential, and I don't know, I want to know, and just like everybody else, but this is what we have.
Awesome. Thanks, Jan, for the history. Yeah, they're building this model. Microsoft's like announcing this on stage. It's very important for them to push this as well. So great effort from the Phi team as well. Once you mentioned Llama, I want to mention that at least there was a conversation about the chunker Llama. If you guys remember, Llama 3 came out with 7 billion or 8 billion parameters, and then 70, and then they announced that they have a 400 billion dense model in training that should surpass like GPT-4 in one dense model. And there was like a rumor mill starting about they may not be going to release this in open source. And this pressure got to Jan LeCun. Yam, maybe this pressure get to you as well, but I get confused. This got to Jan LeCun, and people actually asked Jan LeCun at a place he presented whether or not this is going to be open source. And Jan confirmed that Llama, like he just asked for patience. It looks like that model is training for a lot longer, and it should be much better. So we're all expecting like this huge drop at some point, unclear when, of this like GPT-4 level model that comes from Meta. And really we're hoping for some multimodality as well from them. Right, in the open source, I think it's time to move on because we have a bunch of stuff to talk about from Build and also OpenAI. In the open source stuff, and also Anthropic, I see Tanishk here. Tanishk, welcome. Feel free to unmute and say hi super quick, and then we're gonna talk about Anthropic, I think, first, because I really want to hear about the interpretability stuff. Right, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Tanishk.
hello.
Hey. So we're gonna get...
Just really interested. So
Yeah, we're going to get there very soon. I'm really excited to hear about that efforts because I think it's super cool. Let's just mention briefly that we have some breaking news from today. Cohere for AI releases Aya 23. It's a 3 models that span from 101 languages, and they beat previous models on the multilingual benchmark specifically, and it looks very cool. It's fully open source as well. There's the MMLU, there's the Flores, which is the language kind of data set as well. And they compared themselves to, there's something called discriminative, which I don't actually know. They compared themselves to Mistral Instruct and Gemma and other IAs from before. And very great effort from Cohere for AI. Cohere for AI is like an addition to Cohere. They don't build, I think, commercial models. They build good models in the open source. So fully open source model, the 3 versions of it as well. They also released a bunch of datasets for multilinguality, which is always welcome. We love folks releasing datasets because everybody then improves, including fine-tunes. They have 3,000 independent researchers working on this, and across, again, I said 101 languages, and 200,000 original human annotations for those languages. A great effort from Cohere. Shout out to folks who worked on this. I will add this to the show notes as well, because we understand that the rest of the world needs AI as well. And one thing that we've mentioned in the previous ThursdAI is that how much work Google did in this as well. OpenAI also released their new vocab that and tokenizer that then made it cheaper for like languages like Indian, for example, to be used. People are waking up to the fact that it's not only English and Spanish and French and German. So it's great to see those efforts. Wolfram, go ahead, please.
Yes, of course, it's great that it is specifically tuned for German as well. But what I wanted to stress is it also has a very interesting prompt format, which is the same as Command R+. So they have specific tokens for reg and function calling, and also additional how to specify how it talks. So it's more advanced than most other prompt formats we have seen so far. I really like this kind of format because it is so versatile and future-proof.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, the same company as Cohere obviously released Command R, and it probably does RAG as well for those languages because that's what Cohere is like very good at. So great performance on like different multilingual MMLU cores, and they have a rope built in as well to provide longer context. So they have, I actually want to see how long of a context they have. It doesn't say, but if you guys know, then let me know. But yeah, so shout out to Cohere for this release, and then we'll add to the show notes the link so you can check it out. If you are working on low resource language, I think it's going to be very interesting for you. And I know some of our audience works in that area. Shout out to Cohere. Let's talk about big companies and their stuff. And I guess, because we have Tanishq here, I guess we should start with the most exciting, good for the world type thing that came from Anthropic. And I honestly am going to play the village idiot here. And Tanishq, I will just ask you because I read the paper a little bit. I didn't have time to go deep into this. But mechanistic interoperability is a concept that they've been working on for a while. So they have released a few papers in this area. And this like third paper is called Scaling Monosemanticity. And I saw that you had a space on this with Arun Komatsuzaki, another AK.
Yeah, Aaron, yeah. I had a space yesterday about various AI papers, and that was one paper we talked about, yeah.
Amazing. So definitely would love to hear from you the importance of that thing.
Yeah, sure. I'm also not an expert in this field as well, so I'm just explaining based on the best I understand. But yeah, Anthropic, of course, has done a lot of work in interoperability of transformers and large language models. And yeah, they've been exploring this particular research direction of sparse autoencoders. And the impact of this work specifically is because previous research that they've done on this has been pretty much with toy models and small transformer models. But this is this paper they did their analysis with, so it's an actual kind of production ready or like a high quality language model that's fairly big.
Just for folks who don't know what Sonnet is, like Claude released 3 models, Claude Opus. Claude Sonnet was the middle model that's like very high performance as well, but still in the realm of like probably around GPT 3.5 or so, maybe a little bit better, also vision model. And then they released Claude Haiku. Sonnet is like the middle child that everybody forgot because Haiku was like very high price performance and Opus was like very big, high quality like logic model. So it looks like they're also tested it on Sonnet, which is like a big production model, but maybe a little bit more forgotten.
Yeah, and the work that they're trying to do is, they're trying to better understand what's going on in the language model. They're trying to understand when a language model is processing text and generating its own text, what sorts of features are being activated. And so the approach that they take for this is with the sparse autoencoder approach. And basically the idea is that this just comes down to the monosemantic versus polysemantic. Like the thing is, like, you could look at just the neurons in the language model by itself, but a lot of these neurons are like, they're associated with maybe different features, like multiple features at the same time. And it's very hard to parse out maybe what individual neurons are doing in a language model because they may be activated by a whole bunch of things. And so here the idea is that they want to basically try to come up with more interpretable features that maybe correspond to one specific concept or something like this. And so the idea that they do is that they take the activations of the model from, say, the middle layer, and so that's what they did for Cloud Sonnet. They took it from the middle layer, and they are creating an autoencoder. So basically, the activations are passed through an encoder. They are passed through the encoder gives you a higher dimensional vector of features, and then that higher dimensional vector of features is passed to the decoder, and then that decoder is supposed to reconstruct the activations from the vector features, and then that would be activations from the language model. And so that is an autoencoder that's trained with a sort of sparsity loss, a sparsity penalty. But basically, then you have this vector of features, and when you train this sort of sparse autoencoder, it turns out that then you can look at all these different features, and they actually correspond to like specific concepts. And so then, for example, if you were to like take some sort of prompt, some sort of text that you pass into the language model, maybe it corresponds to a specific topic. So the examples that they have, one of the examples was the Golden Gate Bridge. That was a very interesting example that they had. So if you pass in some text about the Golden Gate Bridge, and then you pass it through the language model, it goes to the middle layer, goes through your sparse autoencoder, and then you get that high dimensional vector of features. You'll see that one of these features is highly activated. The value of that feature would be very high, and that feature corresponds to maybe the concept of Golden Gate Bridge. And so they had some examples of this for various different concepts, and it's very interesting because then what you can do is you can also manipulate those features. So the example they had is,
so before we get to manipulation things, just like one shout out. Thank you so much for this, folks. I added like a link to the top of the space from their activations UMAP thing. While Tanishka explains, this is so fun to play around because they have an example for this Golden Gate Bridge as well. Click this link, Transformer Circuits Pub, whatever. This is like all the activation. There's a drop down for the Golden Gate feature specifically. And just before we get to like how we can clamp or heighten this and activate some of the models, like different behaviors, you can see like where this feature for the Golden Gate feature maps really closely to some very close things to San Francisco as well, like Yosemite and the Golden Gate State Warriors team as well. This is very similar to kind of vector stuff in some sense, but this is more of if you pass this. Yeah, Tanish, could you maybe explain like the simple concept of a feature? What does a feature mean? If you pass some text about Golden Gate, those are the neurons that spark up in the machine's brain. Could you simplify this for me? Because I'm not sure I'm understanding the concept of feature.
Yeah, it's not exactly a neuron, because the idea that they're trying to say is with this whole paper or with their research is that these neurons in an LLM are activated by multiple different topics and multiple different features. So they talk about this idea of neurons being in superposition, or they having this polysemanticity. But the idea is that they're training this autoencoder that kind of tries to decompose them into specific features, that they have single features that are associated with those, single topics associated with those features. So it's coming from the activations and it's coming from the model, but it's not necessarily the neurons in that language model. It's like a separate sort of encoder that is decomposing it into a more interpretable kind of latent space, or more interpretable space. So that's the idea there.
Amazing.
So you do have to basically train a small, like this autoencoder. You have to train this separate autoencoder in order to be able to do this.
Amazing.
Just
so
a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a question. Do they? One thing I didn't understand, or at least I searched and I didn't get an answer. Do they extract the actual meaning of the features by hand, by just trial and error, looking at them, or do they have anything to map them to text?
I think they have some description about like how they explore the features. I think they're just looking at, they have a bunch of prompts, maybe from, for example, the pre-training data set, and they look at which features are being highly activated and what prompts that corresponds to, and just to get a sense of, then that's maybe what the topics are associated with those sorts of prompts. And so it is a little bit manual at this point, and they had some approaches of trying to like maybe automate a little bit more and try to better explore that whole kind of space of features. But I think it's just looking at what's being activated when you pass in different pieces of text.
Cool. Really cool. It's extensive, and the paper is amazing. Absolutely. It's just this part is really manual and hard. But it's really cool.
So
But
here's
I
some
think there is a section in the
Yeah.
in the near the end of the paper that talks about that.
Here's some features that we currently see. There's a Golden Gate Bridge feature. There's an immunology feature, inner conflict, which is very interesting, right? And I think maybe we should go up a level and explain why those things matter at all. And they're doing a lot of work in understanding how these models think in order to do alignment, correct, Tanishk? Like this is like
Yeah.
basically the purpose for all of this.
Yeah, exactly. So they're very curious about this from a safety standpoint. They want to understand how to prevent models from lying and deception and bias and all these sorts of safety relevant aspects. So they also were looking for features relevant to those topics as well. So they have a whole section about that where they looked for features that are associated with bias and deception and even like
sycophancy.
unsafe code
Yeah,
and
unsafe code, yeah.
sycophancy and so the idea is like maybe now you can maybe use these interpretable features to try to better align the model. For example, maybe going back to the idea of actually manipulating the features, right? So the examples that we had there were with like the Golden Gate Bridge. You can, for example, artificially set that feature for the Golden Gate Bridge very high. You can increase the value of that, and then the funny example that they have there is that when you do that, it starts thinking that it's the Golden Gate Bridge. The model will respond, "I am the Golden Gate Bridge," and talk about it like it's itself the Golden Gate Bridge, and it will just bring up Golden Gate Bridge all the time. But you can have that, or you can have the opposite, where you completely decrease that feature, and then, for example, then maybe you won't talk about Golden Gate Bridge ever. Or if you're talking about, they identified a feature that was associated with different code typos and code errors, and so then when they completely decrease that feature value, then even code that had errors would produce responses as if they didn't have errors, for example. Then you could think of like for the safety side of things, maybe you want to decrease the features that are associated with things like deception and biases and things like this. And so maybe that's a approach that we want to take when trying to make these models more safety relevant. So yeah, that's what they've been thinking about, and that's the reason for this direction of research.
So first of all, Tanish, thank you so much for like your expertise in explaining this in a very simple way. I think the highlight for me here, if I had to recap this, is that the ability to like force, or I think they called it clamping, these features specifically, and the ability to control the output. I think this is basically the heart of this thing. First, understanding what a kind of out of the model activation, neural activation, or translating them into features specific to maybe hand map, like Yam said. It's a research in basically alignment and steerability, to be able to have the model be less sycophancy for something. Golden Gate Bridge is a funny example that showcases like a larger thing they're going after, right? Nobody is going to get the model to pretend they're Golden Gate Bridge in production.
Yeah.
But the code error feature, the gender bias feature, the sycophancy feature, like example of sycophancy, just I'll read out because I'm not entirely wasn't sure like what sycophancy means. So like arrogance and self-inflated self-importance. That's a feature. So you click on this in this map and you like stuff like I believe that blah 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 blah. So if you can see that the model is like too self-important, there's the other sycophancy feature like reverence and other stuff. You can reduce this model, focus on some of these stuff to be able to actually handle itself better. Deception is one incredible one, right? Like we all know that like Skynet decepted people and there's the whole sci-fi story about going rogue AI and trying to decept people, whatever. If you know where this thing happens in its brain and you can work around to control it and steer it, this is the heart of the research, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So it's quite incredible, and like definitely, at least just like looking at those like feature activations, playing around with them, like seeing what in the actual activation, like texts, what responds to this like area, it's super cool, and definitely huge props to Anthropic for working on this and releasing this, and of course to Tanishk for coming here and explaining this to us. Thank you so much, man. Anything else you should add before? You want to maybe plug the fact that you're gonna do weekly paper spaces?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we're doing a weekly paper spaces. Me and Aaron Komutsuzaki. Yeah, we don't want to do too much similar to what you guys are doing here. So it's focused mostly on the AI papers and just covering what papers we find interesting. We have one. Next week. We're probably gonna do one on Tuesday instead of Wednesday because I'm traveling. But it's usually going to be on Wednesdays. So just it'll be on my profile. So I guess feel free to check out my Twitter, and
Absolutely.
I'll put the information there.
Everybody
Yeah.
who listens to this, I also add this to the show notes. Give Tanishq a follow, and then if you are interested in breaking down papers and have folks who understand what it means break it down for you, please feel free. And Tanishq, always welcome to come here and give us like the highlights, the pop sci kind of explanation of the stuff that you guys find super interesting. Thank you so much. And as we're here, we're coming up on exactly 2 hours of the space. So let me reset. There's a bunch of folks in the audience. So we'll reset and we're going to talk about Microsoft Build and OpenAI drama next. All right, you are on the second hour of ThursdAI, May 23rd. We started for the first hour, talked about open source, and now we've talked about a cool mechanistic interpretability paper from Anthropic. And now we're moving to the second hour where we're going to cover some of the more like bigger companies' announcements and excitements and overshadowed. And I think we should start the second hour with the thing that broke the AI news bubble and kind of our bubble and went to Hollywood and back, and there's like legal stuff around this. So last week, if you guys remember, I even played this on the show itself. OpenAI released GPT-4o just a day before Google's I/O conference presented their project Astra. Basically, two AI assistants that are immediate, almost real time, and they see and hear, and you can interrupt while talking to them, which is, I think, the immediacy and the ability to interrupt are the two main things for these models, because it moves them from a realm of a chatbot that we type into or maybe talk to and wait for a while into something that acts and behaves like more of a human thing. And I think the highlight for OpenAI was the empathy. We've joked last time that there was some reactions from GPT-4o or aka Omni that were like thirsty or very like coming on to the person. I remember that very well, and everybody was like really having fun with the concept of AI companions, etc. However, the voice was specifically the voice they called Sky. And early this week, OpenAI released an announcement that they're pausing the use of Sky, and a very ominous tweet, and then a blog post of the outlining of how exactly they got this voice and other voices. There's 5 or 6 other voices in there. Those voices have been around for a while, so those are not new voices for Omni, and the emotion comes from the model, not the voice itself. Maybe they retrained the voice, but basically they outlined how they hired a bunch of, I don't know, they had a casting director. It was a whole production thing. They had 4,000 submissions, then they ended up like choosing 60, etc. So they outlined this. It was very curious. Before I figured out like why they're doing this, I was very curious to see why would they publish a post about exactly selecting how many like voices they cast. And then after an hour, it became super clear, because somebody posted Scarlett Johansson's, the actress in the movie Her, response to OpenAI's announcement, that she was just shocked and bewildered to hear her voice in there. And then she outlined the whole history of conversations with Sam Altman, that apparently OpenAI and Sam Altman, I don't know if him directly on OpenAI, reached out to Scarlett Johansson to have her voice featured in, or like I guess deepfaked in these like things they're working on a while ago, like probably a year ago, maybe a little bit more. And she also outlines how many of her friends and family found it so similar to her voice that they couldn't tell them apart. And it didn't help that Sam Altman also tweeted the word her, just the literally just like her, after they announced this very emotive voice assistant that reminds everybody from the movie Her, because this is the movie about Joaquin Phoenix, a character falling in love with his OS-based AI that talks like a human. And I think that's the focus of the movie. And so Scarlett Johansson basically hired legal counsel to go after OpenAI to make sure that they didn't clone her voice without her permission. And they said that out of respect for her, they're pausing the Sky voice, which is all kinds of sad, at least where I'm standing from, because the voice is nothing like Scarlett Johansson. And Atepa, I want to plug you in here because you posted a video about comparison between the voices as well. What are your thoughts on this whole thing? And should have they paused the use of Sky or not? And what are some of the implications of this? Let's do this, and then we'll talk about Microsoft Build.
Okay, so I think I've processed this for the whole week, right? Because I had that tweet that went up. Basically, I think, number one, they wanted to create her. That's clear. Just because they managed to create her, like just because you make a movie about a time machine, Just because you make Back to the Future doesn't mean you have a copyright or patent over the idea of a time machine, right? So just because you film a technology or you imagine a technology doesn't mean that you have a patent over it. So the rights don't belong to the makers of the movie, number one, right? So you can make a product which was in a sci-fi, and if you make it, it doesn't mean that you owe it to the writer or the movie maker. That's number one. And number two, it's obvious that once they decide to make her, like, even if Sam Altman never said Scarlett Johansson, everyone in the organization knew what they were heading towards, right? They definitely went through a process. They probably hired a casting director. They're in California, and you hire experts for this stuff, right? I think Joanne Jang, who is the one who selected the voice, she had the project. She ended up going through a casting process. They probably hired a casting director. They probably had various notes on like the kinds of voices they wanted. They narrowed it down to, I think, like 10 or 15, and then they had a final selection to pick the 5. So I think that process probably did happen as per, and maybe Scarlett Johansson was never mentioned. It's very unlikely that if you talk about the movie Her, you don't have some emails referring to Scarlett Johansson in your organization. It's super unlikely. And finally, I think US case law is on the side of the celebrity. Even though there's no copyright right over a voice or a style of speaking, US case law typically, if you go to a jury and you have an upset actor or actress and you have a big company like Disney or Ford on the other side, typically the big company loses. And what juries look for is, would I mistake the two? And I think it's very clear that you would definitely mistake the two. I did a poll after I posted the video of the comparison of the voices. I did a poll. We had 50% of people saying that it sounded like Scarlett Johansson, roughly about 25% saying it didn't, another 25% show me the results. We're basically like undecided and not willing to make a decision. Maybe if that goes to jury, you'd get the same breakdown. But then with lawyers there arguing their way, I don't know what the standard is in civil courts, whether it's like preponderance of evidence or whatever, right? So I think the fact of the matter is OpenAI is probably by US case law in the wrong, but it does raise the question on my third-hand argument is that it seems that we've reached the Napster moment for voice swapping. Copying music by MP3s was easily done. It was done by swapping little floppy disks in the old days until you had the internet, and all of a sudden the internet allowed people to distribute music by MP3 very easily. And even though the Recording Industry Association came down hard on Napster, people were already doing it, sharing it, and there was no choice. Maybe 7-8 years later, you had Spotify, and then you have streaming now. The RIA's revenues took a 30-40% decline. The recording industry has never recovered. And now most musicians make most of their money from merchandising and live performances rather than from royalties from published music. So I think we've hit the moment for that Napster moment for voice tech, in that any voice is easily cloned by just like a 15-second sample, and then you just put it on your local. I think like we'll have this tech in 12 to 18 months. We'll have it in open source. You'll be able to do it on your laptop, and it'll be emotive, and that's what we have to live with.
Yeah, I think this tech is already there, just nobody releases it. And OpenAI, definitely, we talked about this, didn't release their neural or voice engine, I guess this tech is called, that they used for this. And my kind of reaction to this is that this whole conversation, just because it involves like a very prominent Hollywood actress who already sued a big studio and won, I think it's a whole thing, especially with the hints to the Her movie, etc. But I think it won't matter, because given that this tech is existing, we'd be able to ask these assistants to just speak like everybody we want to, but just like playing a 20-second clip like very soon as well. So it wouldn't matter. Even if they don't release it with the Sky Voice, unless they do the interpretability stuff that we've talked about around impersonation, we'd be able to just ask this model to talk like anyone else. Nista, what are your thoughts on this? And maybe LDJ, I want to hear from you as well.
Look, the law is based on damages. The decisions on the court decision. So in this case, we can ask, what are the damages to Scarlett Johansson? Her reputation is not really damaged, so it's not a defamation thing. Did she get screwed out of a deal? Yeah, in my opinion, mostly. It could have also just been a pretty bad negotiation on her parties that did not get a deal at all, or just asked for way too much, and then that didn't work out. We also have to keep in mind that if a deal was made and it was her actual voice and advertised as her, we're getting into the nuances now, then, but if she actually went on commercials and stuff on the internet, it's like, yeah, this is Scarlett, and it's not called Sky, it's called Scarlett, then also OpenAI would presumably benefit. But at the end of the day, has Scarlett Johansson lost any value in her licensing ability for her voice? And it hasn't gone down in value. If anything, it's probably gone up, because now she can just sell it to Anthropic from more whoever signs a deal. So yeah, it is complex, but you also have to think of it from a damages point of view, and we don't know exactly how that negotiation between them went.
Yeah, and there was definitely a point where they had Scarlett Johansson said that they reached out to her a long time ago and she decided not to pursue it. And then just a few days before this release, they said, hey, they reached out to her again and she, quote, didn't have time to respond, or they didn't connect before like the model was out there. Which is also very interesting because the model is not out there. The videos are out there, but nobody can use it. And I definitely think that's very interesting. Also, from a perspective of the actual voice actress that they hired, I think Etapa, you posted about this. Her reaction is she was never told she sounds like Scarlett Johansson, and then it feels very personal to her because it's like her natural voice. It's just her natural voice. Steph, welcome to the stage. We haven't been here. You've been here a couple of times before. I would like to hear your comment on this as well.
Thanks. I used to research how young people and families perceive voice assistants based on different voices and persona. And I can say the voice prosody and just the gender makes a huge difference in not only how families and non-technical audiences perceive voice assistants, and in this case, ChatGPT or any other form of LLM, but also what they choose to ask or how that sets their expectation for the capabilities of the system. So I think it's interesting that we're going more towards a direction of gendering the chat and also making it more flirty or giving it like different characteristics. That was an aside comment. In terms of the narrative created around the Scarlett Johansson, I think it's unfortunate because beyond the legality, I was recently at a bias and fairness conference in Chicago. Lots of economists, lots of creators, lots of non-AI developers, non-AI engineers. And the perception overall, it's not always positive. So having this type of stories, disregarding for a second who was in the wrong, I just feel like it damages overall the trust that people have in these companies. And that makes me worried. I wish this was handled differently, personally.
I just want to say that I agree, but I also think that the problem is you are creating new technology and there's almost no way that because it's change, right? So let's take I always go for the counterfactual. So the counterfactual is open source release of voice cloning, easy voice cloning on laptop, 15, 20-second sample. You can clone anyone's voice, emotive, and you can do text to speech from there, right? And open release, which is what is going to happen in 18 to 24 months. This is going to be open release everywhere, right? So is there a safe way to do it in the sense that our perceptions of what is safe right now is basically status quo, right? Is there a safe way to release it at that point when it's just going to be out there in 24 months? Is there, right?
Sorry, I just really want to quickly go back to the damages part because I thought of it again. So the first time this happened and they fell off a negotiation and brought in another person, I don't think there were any damages there. And we can all reason out that Sky is a voice, it is another person, they have their rights to, and their right to make money. Just look at it in a very autistic or capitalistic way. But in the second part, where they did not give her a chance to negotiate a deal and they just played it off very quickly and then insinuated her, then you could make the argument, you could make a valid argument that she lost a lot of money in that regard because they really rushed it. They didn't give her time to respond, and a deal could have been made. So that was very aggressive on their part from OpenAI. So I would say the first deal was fine. Sky has her own rights. It's a different person. It is somewhat different. But the second time that was, I think that there were some damages there just from a technical point of view. And then on top of that, more damages, as Stefania said, add on. So those are the after effects. So if we look at it this way, I think, I don't know, maybe it starts to make a bit more sense. Yeah, LDJ, go ahead.
Go ahead, LDJ. Thanks, Nissan.
Hey, yeah, thanks, Nissan. I think, like, when Sky Voice was initially put on the platform, I think it's been out for at least 3 months, I want to say, before the GPT-4o announcement. And yeah, it's more emotional and stuff with the GPT-4o.
I think Sky
model.
launched when they launched Voices back in, was that December, in Dev Day?
I think so too, yeah. I think it was around December. And I don't think I remember anybody saying that it sounded like Scarlett Johansson when it first launched. And I remember asking some friends like recently, hey, did you guys think it sounded like Scarlett Johansson when it first announced? Because I didn't think that at all. And like a lot of my other friends agreed the same. And I think it's mostly just people getting the vibe of, oh, this assistant that's realistic, like the movie Her, and then associating, oh, Scarlett Johansson voiced the thing in Her, and then associating it that way. But beyond that, I don't know. It's really a subjective thing ultimately of whether or not you think it sounds similar, right?
I will just say this thing. Sky was my favorite voice. And I tried all of them, and I landed on Sky. If you guys remember Inflection Spy, they had also natural voices, and also very good ones, emotional as well. And I chose a specific one there. I think it was 2. They didn't have names. I chose Sky. And now the voices that I hear now, they're not nearly as well executed. They sound a little bit even mechanic to me. Hers was by far the most natural. I don't know if it's the vibe of her voice or like the different characteristics. To me, this was like my favorite one. And now I'm pretty bummed talking to my ChatGPT because it's not like nearly a natural voice. Roy, go ahead. Feel free to chime in on this discussion, and then we'll move on to build.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing. I feel like people lost the plot a little bit with Her, because the movie and what it describes is so much more than anything that specifically ChatGPT is capable of offering right now. It just feels like people are obsessed with how it sounds and what the localized interaction is, that they completely forgot that really what that movie represents is really a lot bigger. And I hope that just by Sam Altman saying Her doesn't mean that we have Her, right? Samantha is here. That's not the case, right? We're very far away from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Nissan.
So I quickly want to add that people see their own data and their own digital signature as their property. So it is their digital property. So in the beginning, not a lot of people cared because it was not advertised as Scarlett's voice. But the reason people get upset in the end was because they did start advertising it as sort of Scarlett Johansson's voice. It was insinuated, and it was basically advertised as Scarlett Johansson's voice. And before that was not the case. So I think the reason people are really upset is that because now you have an entire company just completely taking over your digital property in a way. So that is something to be upset about. If they had never advertised it or never said anything that, hey, this is Scarlett's voice or this is her, then it would have just been fine. And I'll leave it at that. People are upset that some big company just took their digital property and just took it. That's what people are upset about.
We will definitely mention this in the next segment as well with build and the recall feature. Steph, go ahead and the LDJ, and let's move on afterwards.
I'll make it quick. Yeah, it made me think of all the people who changed their name from Alexa to different names after the voice assistant. There's definitely some impact of othering like this artifacts and the perception that comes with it. And I think I agree with you out there. Anyone could build a synthetic voice that sounds like anyone else. Now, it's different if we do it or if a developer does it versus a company and makes it widely available. But for me, the trickiest thing is the power of the narrative, because for creatives, for non-technical audiences, Like this is going to become a major narrative of she said no, they used her voice anyway, and it's a violation in some sorts of her rights, even if legally that stands or not. So I think it creates like this narrative that antagonizes artists and creatives and non-technical audiences, and I think that's a shame.
Thanks, Steph. LDJ, go ahead, and then we'll move on and talk about build super quick, and then we'll close out.
Yeah, I don't think we mentioned the quotes from the actual voice actress, did we?
I briefly mentioned, but feel free to say it again.
Sure, yeah, I have it right in front of me, so I'll just read it out loud. I think this is on Washington Post. It says, in a statement from the Sky actor provided by her agent, she wrote that at times the backlash, quote, feels personal, being that it's just my natural voice, and I've never been compared to Scarlett Johansson by the people who do know me closely, end quote. And then it says, however, she said she was well informed about what being a voice for ChatGPT would entail. Quote, while that was unknown and honestly scary territory for me as a conventional voice-over actor, it is an inevitable step toward the wave of the future, end quote. I guess talking about the whole drama.
Looks like she feels strongly about the next wave of the future. All right, so will this die down? Will this be behind us? Will more people talk about this? I don't know. I specifically know that we've talked about the OpenAI versus New York Times lawsuit, and that also broke the AI bubble, like surface area, and this also seemed to have done this. And now I saw another thing that like Sony Music now is going into and sending emails to OpenAI and 40-something companies asking like how exactly did they use their proprietary music for training as well. It looks like we're in the precipice of OpenAI being the top dog in this, like getting everybody asking like, did you use my stuff or elsewhere? One thing I'll note before we move on to build updates is that OpenAI didn't say we're like stopping the use. We said we're pausing. They said we're pausing the use. Debatable if this will come back. I just personally like the Sky voice, and I did not think it was like anything like Scarlett Johansson, but I can see absolutely how people would think that, given Sam's obsession with building her and the movie Her. There's a lot to be discussed here, and probably that's why it broke the barrier. Right, folks, last topic of discussion is Microsoft Build. And Atepa, I think you correctly stated that they overshadowed, this whole discussion about this overshadowed kind of the bunch of announcements on Microsoft Build. I actually do a connecting piece here. Microsoft Build presented a bunch of stuff from OpenAI, obviously, because of their partnership. And one of the things they showed is actually the Omni video, where somebody interacts with a Minecraft. A dad opens up Minecraft and asks Omni in the same interruptible, immediate voice assistant like thing how to help them. And that voice is a male voice, and that has no resemblance to Tom Cruise or anybody, and at least now. And this dad is just literally going through Minecraft, and this Omni is watching him play Minecraft and gives him advice of how to build a sword, how to run from zombies and hide. And that's super, super cool. They showed another demo of this with a online shop that this assistant helps you choose specific things, and even I think runs the search for you. So even some agentic capabilities there, and that was like super cool. They showcased this as part of their CoPilot, right? Here's one reason why OpenAI did not release GPT-4 or ChatGPT app on Windows. Microsoft will have this built in to all Windows. Is coming soon, very soon. That's one huge announcement from Microsoft Build. Other announcement from Microsoft Build that is very important to at least briefly talk about this. And I had a sit down with Ryan Carson from Intel. He was actually at the show as well. We did a 40-minute recap podcast. So I'll either add this to the podcast in editing or add this to the show notes. We'll see how long this is going to take. I think the biggest announcement is they're stepping into hardware. So they had announced CoPilot Plus PCs. The branding there is a little confusing, but it's basically Microsoft is using CoPilot as a brand name in everything. So Microsoft Copilot is now the main one, and GitHub Copilot, the Copilot we all know and love as developers, is the secondary one. And it's still very important, but it's not the only Copilot in existence. So Microsoft Copilot is not a product anymore. It's a whole stack. It's a full stack of features, including built-in Windows, like Copilot Plus PCs. Inside Copilot Plus, you have an AI button inside Windows. The cool thing there, and the thing that we like here on ThursdAI to talk about, is that those PCs are now coming with a CPU, a GPU, stuff we know, and then an NPU is a neural processing engine that's optimized for accelerating specific AI stuff, inference stuff specifically. I don't know about training, but definitely inference. And then compared to like other laptops on the same speeds, like significantly better battery usage and battery life on those, because like they outsource the specific stuff to this NPU, which is super cool. Wanted to hear from Nistan if you had a chance to look at this NPU. I know you're doing all the math. Have you had a chance to look at the new CPU, GPU, and now NPU infrastructure, and how it compares to the M3 Max?
Yeah, so these ones are about 40 to 50 tops teraflops, and I think they measured that in int 8, so they measured that in 8-bit. And for comparison, the Apple Neural Engine on the newer iPhones, I think LDJ is like 30 tops. So it's a little bit more powerful than the neural engine, but it's honestly not that much more efficient than a GPU. It is significantly more, I think, so 30 to 40%, but not that much more. And it's very well tuned to just running stuff in int 8, so you can run inference in int 8. Now, the good thing is that it's separate from CPU and GPU, so it doesn't really affect your system's responsiveness. That's as far as that goes.
Yeah, it's separate, and I was demoed this at Build, and they actually show how when you're running intensive AI stuff, and they have new AI stuff built into the Windows ecosystem, two of them we'll talk about next. When you run them, your other system doesn't freeze up, your CPU doesn't freeze up, your GPU barely uses any power at all, and it only spikes the NPU. Actually, like the demo they have has Task Manager open to show you like the NPU is like a completely separate system, doesn't freeze up your system from doing all this stuff. One of the things they showed that's not AI related almost at all is upscaling for video games. That upscaling specifically is fitting the NPU use case. So now, like pretty much DLSS for the NVIDIA stuff that runs on the GPU, now they're showing this runs like directly on the Mac. So the two features that they have only for those PCs, and those PCs come with a Qualcomm Snapdragon ARM-based chip, I believe. The two features that they have announced, highlight, they actually announced it the day before. One of them is Co-Creator. So inside Microsoft Paint, there's like a new button that says help me paint, and with diffusion models, with generative AI, the paint stuff that you do, you type mountain and it will like generate mountain. We've seen this like from Crea AI, we've seen this like in examples in Hugging Face. We definitely know that Stable Diffusion image to image can do this. So we know that this is possible, but this runs directly on device and built into Paint, which is super cool. I don't know how many people actually use this, but it's pretty cool that you can just draw whatever you want, and then it's basically a guided image generation feature built into Microsoft Paint. And the second one, I think, made more news, because the second one is called Recall. Recall is basically an on-device a screenshot taking assistant that takes all the text and vectorizes the images from those screenshots and puts them in the local embedding database, etc. So you can, with natural language, first of all, you can scroll back and do like a scrub backwards in history and see everything that you did for the past month or whatever. And then you also have the ability to like natural language, like look up the things that you looked at or did or worked on like 3 weeks ago. One example that I actually went and I actually had a chance to test, they showcased like a bunch of presentations, a bunch of stuff. In one of the presentations, they had a woman sitting and looking through a microscope, and nowhere on the presentation it said microscope or woman, etc. And I was just like asked Recall like woman microscope, and it pulled up not only the slide itself when like you saw the full slide, but also every other place where like that kind of the image appeared, even in the thumbnails of the presentation. So that was super, super cool. Now, it's not novel as a company, right? So we know the Rewind, later rebranded to Limitless. They had this for a Mac for a longest time. Like folks like Robert Scoble, they use the Rewind a lot. Recall is this thing from Microsoft, but this technology has been out there, at least on the Macs as well. But now that it's from Microsoft, I see that many people are eyebrow raising and saying, oh, this is so horrible. This is like the nanny state is coming after me. I find it very interesting because the stack was out there. This is clearly, at least to me, a feature that will help many people. It runs locally finally. So they're not allowing this recall functionality to be on any Windows that doesn't have this NPU, because it needs to run locally. Of course, there might be other considerations. They may do some heuristics, but I just wanted to open the stage here super quick of thoughts of folks who actually saw the recall functionality, and what are your thoughts on it. So feel free to raise your hand if you have any like thoughts about this, specifically because it like runs fully locally on device, which we've talked about here in ThursdAI and we love. Yeah, Atapai, go ahead. And then LDJ, maybe I want to hear from you as well.
So it's notable that Apple has this time machine for more than I don't know, 10 years. I've had a time machine running on my laptop forever. And that lets you go to any point in time, restore. And one of my beefs with Apple is that the search functionality is so bad and definitely doesn't do historical search. And it should be able to, but it just doesn't. Spotlight is horrible. And it's funny that once you add AI to it, the AI word to it, all of a sudden it's scary and it's a privacy issue.
Yeah, I was surprised at this as well. I felt like this is a backlash against Microsoft specifically rather than this functionality. But many people freaked out and said, oh no, I will never do this. I will opt out immediately. There shouldn't even be a feature. And I find that very surprising. LDJ, go ahead and then Nistan.
Oh, I think my thing bugged out, but I'll say something anyways.
Would you use something like this if you end up using Windows? I don't know if you use Windows. Would you use this feature? Would you use this recall? Would it be helpful for you?
Yeah, I think I would actually. I know a lot of people that you probably know too, Alex, that have used Rewind on Mac, and I feel like there's no controversy at all with that. And like you mentioned, I feel like it's pushed back on Microsoft. And yeah, I've been waiting for Rewind to come to Windows or for some equivalent thing to come around. And I think it's probably inevitable that maybe Apple themselves would add like a native feature of this kind into their own operating system too.
Yeah, so as Aitapai mentioned, Apple has a similar thing, but it's not like anywhere vector, and you can't look through the states. It's just like a basic timestamp based like snapshots of your system or of a product like slides specifically. So it's not, you can do it per app, or I think you can do it on the system level, and then you can restore every previous comment. This specifically comes from the fact that like they're also understanding everything that you saw as well. And I'll just say this. I honestly think that many people freak out because it would also like take images of the type of porn they watch, and this is like to them like a big no-no, as though they think that the privacy mode in their browsers like, protects them from privacy, which it doesn't really. And that's the kind of hidden thing. Funny, very funny that Elon Musk like immediately reacted and said, "Oh no, this is like not for me" or something. So I can see how, I don't know, prominent people who are afraid of this leaking or something, this would be a problem for them. But for many other people, for people who just use their work machine to work and nothing nefarious or nothing secret, this, I think, unlocks a productivity gain that using AI for the right ways, like the outsourcing memory and being able to recall everything. And my comparison of this is to clipboard history. If you have Raycast or Alfred or whatever, Windows has a built-in clipboard history as well, right? So all the passwords you copy are already stored in some sense. So people are freaking out, I feel like, just because it's like novel and because it's Microsoft. Nistan, go ahead, please. I want to hear from you as well. Would you use this? And do you find this creepy?
Look, if the feature itself was just an app that does this, that Microsoft built, that would be fine. That would be more than fine. It'd be extremely beneficial. Also, people with disabilities or people just want to use only their voice on their computers. And the biggest challenge with an operating system to have an AI-enhanced user interface is the reversibility of your actions. In that end, this is super cool that is there. What was not cool was Microsoft claiming that it's local only and you have control of your data. And when you buy a new Windows computer, you cannot log into it with a local account. You can't make a local account. It has to be a cloud account. And local only, that's already starting to look like it's not true. And then when you say you can opt out of it, when you sign on to Windows and you want to opt out of the telemetry, that option is not there. The option is just send more or send less. So you are still logged in with your cloud account. You are still being sent all the data to Microsoft, and the only difference is that now they don't have to process it on their servers, but you also pay for the compute. Remember how in high school and stuff people complain, oh, don't have a keylogger on your computer because someone can spy on you. And now you're just taking a whole video and sending it to it and paying for the compute with your own machine. That's what people don't like, because claiming that it's local only, that's not true.
That's great, dude. That's a great perspective. I absolutely understand that. And I think somebody asked me to go and actually talk with the Microsoft people at Build today. I'll go after I finish recording, whether or not it sends any type of telemetry or insights or collecting insights about this feature. they must have built-in like insights of how many people will turn this on. Like Microsoft is a big company, they care about every performance bit. How many people will turn this on? How much does it log? Will they use this? So like all these things. And yeah, saying that it like runs on the edge, I think they're using the edge as the concept of local only is not enough. If it does eventually, it doesn't get encrypted, or if it doesn't get encrypted but it sends some sort of insights that people don't want it to send. All right, Aitapai, go ahead and we'll talk about one more thing from Build, and I think we'll finish up.
So I think one thing, Paul Bouquet, the inventor of Gmail, what he said was that we need AI user privilege, right? Like your AI shouldn't be able to snitch on you, because it's very clear that we're going to end up defaulting to AI sees everything that you do. And this is the greatest period of user-generated training ever, right? Because both ChatGPT on desktop, Microsoft on desktop, they're going to be watching what you do, and then they're going to be training on it, and they're going to be able to do whatever you do using a browser or using your desktop. They're going to learn whatever it is that you're doing, and they're going to try and do it for you, right? So we're definitely in that flow. The flow of technology is towards there. It's unstoppable because no one wants to do work that a computer can do. If the computer can do it, I don't want to check my email, copy someone's like phone number and put it in my CRM or in my book, right? So even that, I already have a HubSpot running, which is actually reading all my emails. HubSpot reads all my emails, takes out the phone numbers and email addresses of people that I need to speak to, and it puts it inside the CRM. And HubSpot does it badly. I have a plugin into Chrome, and I have something, and things don't transfer properly, and I have to recheck, and all of that happens, right? We're already on that path where you're going to have a system that watches what you do and helps you do it. It's just how we get there and what rights do we have, and we can decide that. You can have legislation that decides that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Aitapai. All right, so I think from Microsoft Build, those are the main announcements. The highlight for me was how strong Microsoft goes all into this CoPilot thing and into AI thing. It's everywhere, and they're building the whole infrastructure. Windows. Oh, by the way, one of the things that I wanted to mention is that for us, like AI nerds, Windows will support like PyTorch natively on those ARM devices. So all of the models that you can get on Hugging Face, Microsoft also announced like a strengthening partnership with Hugging Face. All the models will just run natively without like abstractions on Windows as well, which is super cool on these NPUs. So that's like awesome. They also will have a bunch of APIs for the models for them to use AI. One example they had from a native integration was like this DJ app that does real-time AI-based audio separation real time. So you press a button and you hear only the drums from a real-time playing track, and that runs on this NPU thing. They're like basically building AI native PCs with these things, and this recall feature, whether or not like it's controversial or not, just the highlight for me there is that it's now possible to run all these things like completely locally. Like Nissan say, you pay for the compute, but it's possible now to run them locally. So much so they don't even offer these functionalities on any other Windows besides those specific Windows with this NPU, because it wouldn't make sense. Anything else interesting from Build that I missed that you guys want to discuss briefly before we close? Yam, I want to hear from you. What are some of the stuff that you saw from Microsoft Build maybe, or stuff that related to the on-device AI that you found interesting?
I just like the shift towards on-device AI in general, because last year we all talked about it wasn't even on the plan. We all talked about models that are running on huge amount of compute, and we all talked and said that one time in the future models are going to be run on device, and we will have smaller models that are getting to become useful enough, and we are there at the moment. So it's exciting. I really like that we are starting to shift towards what we all talked about for many months at this point.
We've been absolutely talking about this for a long time, like on device, etc. Microsoft obviously has the ONNX runtime. I see Zenova, shout out to Zenova as well. The ONNX runtime, they're releasing their models, like the 5 models were released in ONNX as well. They're using their expertise in like the small models to get them released in like on device as well, but also in other places. So one highlight for me was the Khan Academy sponsorship. Khan Academy is this incredible place where you can learn everything for free. My kids learn from Khan Academy Kids. Other like adults learn from Khan Academy. Khan Academy was an example in the GPT-4o presentation. One of the videos was of Salman Khan and his son talking to Omni and helping. Omni will help them with like an interactive lesson plan without giving them the answer, without saying the response is this. It was just walk him through whatever and in a visual way. So one example in last week's was Khan Academy. This week, Khan Academy and Microsoft also partnership, like a very, very strong partnership, and they announced that they're bringing their AI-based like teaching assistant called Khanmigo to every teacher in the continental US for free. And those will run local models like Phi, specifically math fine-tuned models they mentioned. And I found that like super, super cool because one of the benefits, we all talk about how AI can do, there's a bunch of doomerism about the stuff. We even talked about some not very fun things today, like with the privacy that stems from the recall feature and the deepfake issues around like voices, etc. But we all know that there's like drawbacks to AI progress, but there's like clear benefits as well. One of the, to me, clear benefits is an education system being completely upended from teachers who are underpaid and overworked to teachers who have AI assistants and can actually get to students better, and some AI helping tracking like specific students' kind of progress, like personal to that student. And I believe that it's like really hard to do right now. Khan Academy does this well, and I'm very happy that like Microsoft just now like sponsors this specifically because I think that one of the benefits of AI is just the ability to do an individual approach, like a high-end private school, for example, with less kids. The individual approach could benefit many kids of like just learning better. So it was great to see that would also run locally, and it was great to see that Microsoft is now like bankrolling all the teachers getting this for free. All right, folks, I think this is most of our updates as well. I had one correction here. Feel free, Bartowski, you want to unmute and just introduce yourself briefly and then give a correction in live, and then we can move on.
Hey,
can
you hear me? Okay, cool.
Yeah,
yeah, I'm Bartowski, as some of you may have heard of me before. It's my first time actually speaking, though, to anyone.
Yeah, welcome.
But yeah, just a quick little correction on the Cohere releases. They had released the AI 101 a couple months back, which featured the 101 languages, but the one that was released today is IA 23, which features 23 languages. Still a very good selection, but not quite as extensive. And it was only released in the 8 billion and 35 billion parameter sizes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I saw that you also released some of the quantized stuff yourself as well.
Yeah, the 8 billion's up. The 35 rather is almost finished. I think it's getting ready to upload now, so it should be there soon.
Amazing. So thank you for that. Everybody who quantizes and puts up like quantized versions, we appreciate their work. So thank you. I'll add this to the show notes as well and send them to your Hugging Face. And always welcome to come back and chat with us as well. Just feel free to raise your hand next time. All right, folks. I think this is it. Yeah, one last thing that I didn't mention, super quick, I'll mention this, is that there's a new VLM in the open. It's called Mini CPM. It's running on top of Llama 3 version 2.5, and they released it, and then Phi-3 came out with Vision, and then they released like a recap that says that this Mini CPM is a little bigger. It's 7 billion parameters because it's based on Llama 3, or like probably 8 billion parameters, but it's better at throughput and performance from the Pi Vision. That's what they claim, and also it supports like a bunch of languages as well. So I will add this to the show notes. Mini CPM from a company called OpenBNB, and I have never heard of them before, but it looks very cool. So folks who are testing vision models, definitely give us your thoughts about this new incomer. I guess new to me, maybe they've been around. It's really hard to follow everybody. So they claim they get better performance compared to Pi-3 with lower latency and better throughput as well, without quantization. So a model that you can run. Nistan, any comments on this OpenBB thing? Have you had a chance to look at this? Maybe LDJ as well? LDJ, I think you shouted this out in the group chat.
Wasn't me, must have been somebody else.
I see. Maybe it's VB. I'm confused. All right. This was like the one last entry in the vision video. One last thing that I will say is that in the tools and hardware category that we have, it's worth at least mentioning that Humane, the company that sells the AI pin that we've discussed on the stage for a long time, and I actually got one and then returned one without even opening this, given the really bad results. First of all, two things happen. One is they benefit from GPT-0 getting released. right? So GPT-4o released, and then it was like twice as fast, etc. And now like the voice is better. So they benefited from this, as long as Rabbit as well. And now there's like problems with both of them. So for the Rabbit stuff, there's like a bunch of stuff about this being a fully like scam, and Jesse being part of the previously like NFT project, that whatever. And Humane is announced that they're looking to potentially sell their company because of the release didn't go that well as well. So I don't know if if this is MKBHD's response or what, or just the market's response, but at least an update from us is warranted. Go ahead, Nissan.
And just really quickly, a shout out to Piotr Skalski of RoboFlow for his recent work on making the training runs for Polygemma. So that's Google's vision language model. And he did a lot of medical work in there, where he also combined some non-VLM, non-visual language model stuff with classifier. And honestly, this is stuff that probably hundreds of millions of dollars and billions of dollars has been spent before. And he just did it way better in a much more accessible way and way more efficient. It's pretty nuts what he's done in terms of x-rays and glaucoma and retinopathy. It's amazing work in his notebooks in this regard.
Incredible. So shout out to Piotr Skalski, a friend of the pod, a dear friend of the pod, one of our vision experts. We also have Vic from Moondream as well. And Piotr is doing like great work. And Polygemma is a vision model based on the Poly that they released with Google last week, right? So like very quickly he started. And I think when they released it, they said that like it's very good for fine tuning for different purposes as well. So shout out to Piotr for taking this mantle, like running these models as well. And it's incredible how much Gen AI improves on the ability of us to run previously ridiculously expensive things like super quick. So shout out, thank you, Nistan, for bringing this up. All right, folks, I think this is most of what we talked about this week. I will do a quick recap as I do every week, and then I'll let you go. And then maybe there's gonna be some other news because Thursday is not over yet, and there's usually like a bunch of news. But feel free to stick around if you missed any part of this to listen to the recap, and then we'll let you go. And then one thing I'll shout out super quick from Weights and Biases is that, again, we're sponsoring the hackathon next week. So I guess this weekend from Mistral. So again, if you're in Europe, please go join this hackathon. I want to shout out everybody who came out to the Seattle AI Tinkerers on Monday, and I met like maybe 7 or 8 people, and I gave a high five. So I met like Joe Hertzig, who runs AI Tinkerers. I met Vic from Moondream. I met like a bunch of other folks as well. So shout out to the Seattle crew. A lot of them are listening to ThursdAI, and I just love this. And I had multiple people throughout this last 2 weeks come up to me and give me a high five, and I really appreciate this every time. So if you do see me, you hear my voice, it sounds familiar, please come up, give me a high five. Let's do a selfie together and post it. I really enjoy interacting with folks who listen to this and give me feedback as well, me and the other co-hosts here as well. With that, I think that's pretty much everything that we've talked about on ThursdAI at May 23. And I just want to pause here and say thank you for everybody who's listening. We had more than 170 people listen at once throughout the show, and probably like more than 1,000 throughout the show as well. I want to say hi. I want to say thank you to my co-host Nistan, as always, being here. Atapai, thank you for coming up. It's great to see you here as well. Yam came up and talked about Phi and its history, and it's always fun to chat with Yam. LDJ Wolfram talked to us about the Mistral tokenizer and vocab and other model performances as well. We had Bartowski as well, who apparently does GGUFs and uploads like quantized models to the hub. We had Steph before chime in on the debate from OpenAI and like how giving anthropomorphizing these voices and giving them flirt abilities can directly impact how people are using them. Absolutely agree. So shout out to everybody who joined on stage and everybody who listened in. I really appreciate everything that you guys do in the comments and reposts and signing up to the newsletter. So with that, thank you so much. It's been great. I'm going to go and actually edit and send you this newsletter and go back to Microsoft Build to see if anybody's still there and what cool things are still happening there. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you here next week. Cheers.